Hello, my name is Nathan Muchai, and this is going to be my world history assignment on the bubonic plague, a PowerPoint presentation. Introduction. The Black Death or bubonic plague was one of, if not the most devastating pandemic in human history, commencing in 1347 until 1352. This was about 5 to 6 years. Now, it resulted in about 75 to 200 million casualties and is one of the deadliest plagues the world has ever witnessed. The Black Death originated in China during the early to mid 1300s, spreading to other parts of Asia, the Mediterranean, and eventually Europe. Moreover, it was originally carried by rat fleas, passing the disease to passengers of merchant ships and then to the general population. Now, the plague had significant political, economical, and cultural impacts, changing the way of human life forever. The origin and spread of the bubonic plague. The bubonic plague caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis began to spread globally, moving from Central Asia to China in the early 1200s, reaching the Black Sea in the late 1340s. It then spread to the Middle East and Europe through the Silk Road and trade ports between 1347 and 1351. Traditionally, historians have argued that the transmission of the plague involved the movement of plague-infected fleas from wild rodents to the household black rat. However, new evidence now suggests that it might have or must have been transmitted first by direct human contact with rodents and then via human fleas and head lice. Due to the lack of knowledge in the medical field, the plague was thought to have been caused by the alignment of the stars, though later neglected for obvious reasons. The image to the right illustrates the spread of the bubonic plague throughout Europe, and the key in the top left corner displays when each region in Europe was affected by the plague. Symptoms and treatment. Symptoms: blood and pus seeped out of strange swellings in groins and armpits. Now, this was then followed by a host of other unpleasant symptoms. These included fevers, chills, vomiting, diarrhea, terrible aches and pains, and then in short order, death. The bubonic plague attacked the lymphatic system, causing swelling in the lymph nodes and could spread to the blood or lungs if left untreated. Treatment: physicians really relied on crude and unsophisticated techniques such as bloodletting and boil lancing, and superstitious practices such as burning aromatic herbs and bathing in rose water or vinegar. The image to our right illustrates the plague's effect on the different people during the Black Death. Socio-economic effects and impacts. Prior to the plague, the king owned all the land which he allocated to his nobles. The nobles had serfs work the land, which turned a profit for the lord, who paid a percentage to the king. The serfs, however, earned nothing much for themselves, even due to the amount of labor they did. Additionally, due to the lack of shortage of serfs to work there was no upward mobility in the feudal system, and the serf was tied to the land they worked on. The population greatly reduced the workforce of the serfs, and the serfs' labor became of importance. The lord couldn't feed himself or pay tithes to the king or the church without the labor of the peasants, and the loss of so many men that survivors could actually now negotiate for pay and better treatment. The lives of the members of the lowest class vastly improved, as they could now afford better living conditions, clothing, and luxury items. The image to our right depicts how difficult life was as a laborer prior to the plague during the medieval times. Socio-economic impacts. Once the plague had passed, the improved living standards of the serf was now challenged by the concern of the upper class. Now, due to the fact that fashion improved so much for the lower class, the upper class started demanding better clothing and accessories to distance themselves from the poor. The serfs formed multiple uprisings due to the upper classes' attempts to oppress them in order to return them back as their workers and slaves. Now, some of these revolts included the revolt in France in 1358, the Guild Revolt in 1378, and the Revolt of London in 1381. Class struggle continued, but the authority of the feudal system was now broken. The image to our right depicts the Peasant Revolt of London in 1381. Effects and impact on medicine and religion. Now, what were its effects and impacts on medical knowledge and practice? Doctors and caregivers died when trying to cure plague victims using their traditional understanding. In addition, barely anything doctors really prescribed did anything to the patient. People recovered from the plague or died from it for seemingly no reason at all, and cures did not positively affect all patients, as some patients were in even more danger. After the plague, doctors began to question their former practice of accepting the knowledge of the past without adapting it to the present circumstances. The death of many scribes and theoreticians resulted in new works being written in vernacular local languages. People could then read medical texts, thus broadening the base of medical knowledge. Furthermore, hospitals developed into institutions resembling those in the modern day, as previously hospitals were only to isolate the sick. After the plague, they became centers of treatment with a much higher degree of cleanliness and attention to patient care. Its effects on religious belief and practice. Those of religious importance, such as the clergy, were also infected with the plague and died much like anyone else. The flagellant movement, in which groups of penitents will travel town to town, whipping themselves to atone for their sins, began in Austria and gained momentum in Germany and France. This was done as the plague was thought to have been caused by God's anger over the people's sins. Those who died of the plague were suspect to personal failing of faith. The clergy also died of the same disease in the same way. Scandals within the church and the extravagant lifestyle of many of the clergy combined with the mounting deaths from the plague to generate widespread distrust of the church's vision and authority. Internal impact of the plague. The bubonic plague caused multiple persecutions and widespread migration, and the most common targets were Jews. Now, the Jews were viewed as a Christ killer, hence why they were seen as targets across Europe. It is also important to note that many people believed that the Jews were the causes of the Black Plague because of the fact that they were viewed as Christ killers. And additionally, women gained a higher status after the plague as due to the death of so many men. They could own land, have greater liberty in choosing a mate. Moreover, women joined guilds, ran shipping and textile businesses, and could own taverns and farmlands. It is to note that many of these rights were diminished later in history, but they were still better off after the plague than before it. Lastly, art and architecture were also affected as many art pieces were focused on death. Architectural works were also subjected to word, sin, and death, and structures became more cost effective. The right is a dancing Maccabee in St. Mary's Church, Berham. Uh, this image, as you can see, depicts and the focuses on death due to the many skeletons in it. The bubonic plague shaped European and Asian life drastically with the many medical advancements and political and socio-economic changes. Additionally, its influence on culture, religion, and the arts makes it one of the most significant events in human history, as well as the improved living standards of the lower class and women. Furthermore, it was and still is the deadliest plague we humans have ever experienced, or at least has ever been recorded, resulting in 75 to 200 million deaths in total and took 30 to 60% of Europe's population. All its significances and changes, whether good or bad, are what have helped shape this world as we know it today and continues to change every aspect of human life as a whole. This page includes my references from The Black Death and its Aftermath in origins.osu.edu, The Black Death by history.com, and the effects of the Black Death on Europe on worldhistory.org. Thank you, and thank you.